we can begin thinking about what equality in political power would be like by distinguishing between an input theory of equality in political power and an outcome theory. And I have in mind just what that suggests. An input theory of a political equality would say, political power is equally distributed, democracy is genuinely realized when everyone has an equal vote, when everyone has the same say, person by person, in deciding what the Constitution shall be like, who shall be the officials, what decision the officials will make, all the things that fall to be voted. And people will have equal political power even when the outcome of this process, as it might very well be, is a very unequal distribution in the sense of that some people will get a lot of what they want through that process and others will get practically nothing because some will be in the majority and others will be in the minority. An input test says what the upshot of the process at the end of the day will be is important, to be sure, but it doesn't touch the question of whether there was equality of political power because, for example, in a town meeting, simple form of political decision-making, if everyone has one vote, that is equality of political power. An outcome approach, on the other hand, says there is no way to describe equality of political power ex ante by looking on the input side. The only way to decide whether political power is equally distributed through a community is exactly by looking at the upshot of the process to see whether the decisions reached are in some sense fair. Now, there's a great argument, there has been a great argument over the years about whether input theories or outcome theories are better theories about the equal distribution of political power. The paradox I have in mind is that there seem crushing and final objections to both of them. Let me begin by talking about the objections that I see to an input theory of political equality. Suppose there are, as often there are in communities, permanent minorities across a wide range of public decisions. These could be racial minorities, these could be religious minorities, these could be, on the other hand, cultural minorities, ethnic minorities of different sorts, but they could also simply be minorities of political conviction. And if we say equality of political power is achieved simply by giving each person one vote and one side always loses, then there's something bizarre about describing as a situation as having or consisting in equality of political power in which one group, namely the minority, has no political power at all, in the very real sense that whether they exercise their vote or not will make no difference to their fate. Suppose the community is divided into a majority of art enthusiasts and a minority of sports spectator enthusiasts, and the questions come steadily before the town meeting, one by one, whether public resources shall be used to buy pictures for the museum or to build facilities such as gymnasia. And if one by one the minority loses these issues, then the minority is in the position that its political power has absolutely no value to it. It is no better off than if it didn't have a vote at all. Now, that's a suggestion that there's something odd, bizarre, about saying this is a position of political equality. But I think the troubles with the input theory are, in a way, even more serious, because once we expand the idea of the input of political power beyond the notion of a vote to include voice, to include, for example, participation through lobbying, through speaking, through assembly, through the myriad ways in which we, some better than others, influence political decisions, then not only does a pure input test seem unfair, but it also seems incoherent, because I don't see how we have any metric for measuring whether someone's ability to influence the political decision through these ways other than voting, these important ways, is the same as the next person's. What could that mean? Once we say that it doesn't mean the ability to have what you want. But of course, once we say, the metric is ability to have what you want, then we've switched from a pure input test to an outcome test. Well, is the upshot of this, however, that we should be concerned with an outcome test, that we should reject the conventional input test of democracy and instead accept an outcome test? Once again, there seem to me crushing objections to using an outcome test. And these are, in a way, parallel to the objections I've made to using an input test. Because when we switch from the kind of issue that I described a moment ago, namely how shall public resources be used? Shall we buy yet another Titian at the cost of building a basketball stadium? When we switch from that kind of a question to a question like, what shall the criminal justice system be like? Should there be capital punishment? What provision should be made in society for the handicapped? When we switch to questions of that character, which also fall to the political process for decision, then it seems quite wrong to suppose that everyone should in some way have a certain slice of things going his or her way. If there were a permanent minority of hawks, for example, on criminal justice, we would not think that the ideal of equality of political power could be realized only by saying, if they formed 1/3 of the community, for 1/3 of the criminals who are convicted of crime, those thirds should be executed, because that would somehow represent the authority proportionately of that one group. On issues of this sort, we don't believe that a system is unfair if one side consistently loses, whereas on the other issues I mentioned, we did think that. Once again, it not only seems odd and bizarre to suppose that political equality is only realized by equality of result, of outcome, by a fair distribution, by somebody getting his way some of the time. When we switch to issues of that sort, once again, there's the problem of incoherence. What would it mean to say, I had gotten my way a proportionate amount of the time, therefore I had equal political power, when we were thinking about the design of the criminal justice system? I don't see what it could mean.